as the world adapts to a new world created by the COVID-19 pandemic, businesses cannot be spared. It is time for business to shift its focus beyond profiteering to a larger cause of developing society. Talk to us tonight more on stakeholder capitalism is the president of Business Unity South Africa, Sipho Pityane. And to be a part of the conversation tonight, you can give us your views on that question. Can business be viewed as a trustworthy and reliable partner beyond profiteering, particularly as the world battles this pandemic? 072-110-5584, or you can tweet us at Newzroom405. Dr. Pityane, good evening and thank you very much for your time.
Good evening, Tabo, to you and the viewers.
You say, and I want to put it to you as a question in what you were presenting in your dialogue, that business needs to look at itself beyond maximizing the value for shareholders, but now to bring value to broader society. In fact, what you're saying, while we highlight many initiatives during this pandemic of how business has allowed itself to be viewed as a trustworthy partner, we have to ask the question, can business be trusted beyond, for example, issues of global warming? Has it showed in its behavior this instance of wanting to go beyond just maximizing value for the shareholder? So I'll put that question to you. Has business done that?
Well, Tabo, let me say this, that this is a global debate amongst business and corporates and society in general, that business benefits from societies, benefits from wealth created by others, etc., and that it is no longer so that the business of business is just the pursuit of profit and it is just an isolated entity out there. There's a broader recognition of business being a corporate citizen and that it must play its part in that. So we have to look at what our global challenges are. We are all having high up the issues around being environmentally responsible and to push back the tide of climate change and its devastating impact on social and economic infrastructures, as we have witnessed in a number of cases, and many of us are taking measures to deal with that. The point that one is raising is that, yes, let's be part of those global movements, but also we must look at the specificities of our own environments. And in the South African context, the issues of inequalities are what we should be confronting as business in particular, and ask ourselves what becomes our role in dealing with inequalities in their various manifestations. And I'm drawing attention to the fact that the role that business has played during the pandemic has been laudable. We've had fantastic responses from business with regard to providing their infrastructure and encouraging social distancing. I have to tell you that with the vaccination program, business has offered more capacity to state to roll out vaccines and access vaccines than has been used. So that does suggest that there is common cause, and whenever business thinks that there is something to come to the table on, we can work together. Clearly, we have to ask ourselves, are we doing enough to push back the tide of inequalities?
You have two sides to this narrative. On the one side, you've got populism, you've got nationalism, you've got a sense of anti-trade agenda dominating the narrative. And on the other side, you've got business trying to carve this path so that it is seen as business engaging society and playing its part. When did this come about? When did this epiphany or this realization come about for business that shareholder maximizing value for the shareholder is no longer a desirable thing to do?
You will note that in my statement to the trialogue, I just make the point that in the past there has been so-called social responsibility programs, which were in some cases feel-good effect, giving out handouts after profits would have been shared. to communities to assist here and there. What we're enjoined to do now is basically to be part of solutions that attack structural fundamentals that cause fault lines in societies and in our environment, that being inequalities, broader globally, being issues around climate change, etc., that we must be part of a movement around that. So most companies would now be talking about a sustainability agenda. In our own Companies Act, there is a requirement that boards must have what is called social and ethics committees that look, among other things, around the social issues that business must be engaged with, which are specific to societies. These needn't be legislated. They must be about businesses that are committed to ensuring that societies are lifted with the improved performance of business.
And that's precisely where I suppose you will hit a lot of criticism with that view that says, no, this should not be legislated. In other words, it should come out of the goodness of the heart of business. Many are saying, well, this stakeholder capitalism is an elaborate PR stunt espoused by business to navigate itself outside of this crisis. Without actual commitment or legislated commitment, business will continue to do what business does, and nothing will actually ever come out of it.
Well, I don't want to be misunderstood. I certainly think that it is the responsibility of government to legislate. But I am saying that it is a responsibility of a corporate responsible business to take a view that we're not going to be driven by compliance to legislation. We're not going to be driven by ticking the boxes, but we're going to demonstrate our commitment to being part of a solution to the issues that afflict our societies. The proposals that we put to government, by the way, as part of a set of recommendations on economic recovery, were about that we shouldn't just go back to business as usual. We must think about how we use the aftermath of the crisis to imagine an economy that is less unequal than the one we'll be emerging from as after the COVID-19 crisis. So we have to interrogate that and see to what extent the proposals that have been put forward achieve that or fail to do that. So we need to examine opportunities at all times to build an inclusive economy, affirm small enterprises, affirm the marginalized Black communities and women and others in the economy, and begin to mainstream them as the economy recovers.
Now, if you look at the latest statistics, they paint a picture of an economy well on its way to recovery. For example, if you look at mining stocks, they've done incredibly well still, even in this time of the pandemic. And many are saying, well, why should we listen to business? Why should society listen to business right now? Why is voice of business right now, especially also the voice of those they see as the liberal elite, important in this time?
Well, the fact of the matter is that we can't ignore business. It is a factor in society, whether this is what we wish for or not. The reality of the matter is that no economy can be driven without business being active there. People are prepared to risk their capital to invest in those economies. We should encourage that to happen. But we must encourage responsible business. We must encourage and promote business that is part of the solution. And indeed, we must legislate when necessary to ensure that business plays its part and its responsibility. Those of us that are in organized business formations have got to make sure that we honor our commitment to ensuring that we are part of the solutions to society. Trust is earned, Thabo, and people must look at what it is that we do. For as long as we have businesses that are involved in corrupt activities, there will be every reason for people to not trust business. But those voices in business that speak out and act against corruption must be encouraged to do so. For as long as there are those that take huge sums of money in the face of high levels of poverty in society, questions will be raised about whether business is selfish and indifferent to inequalities. But those that raise questions about what do we do to address the inequalities must find a place at the table to design solutions that achieve that. Yeah. There isn't a homogeneous animal called business, by the way. There will be somebody else who will come just after me and tell you something completely different about what the vision of business should look like. Yeah. Certainly from our perspective as Business Unity South Africa, we embrace the agenda for inclusive growth that is about an equitable society. That is the aspiration of our new order since 1994.
Yeah. Yet again, though, even during this time of a pandemic, the economic fortune seems to accrue on the side of business, more than the side of, let's say, 2 million people in this country who lost their jobs.
Well, that is true. That's a function of the structural deficiencies in the economy that we've been arguing should be addressed, and we've tabled any number of proposals. We're pleased that President Ramaphosa has taken measures in the recent period to suggest a commitment to accelerate that. To end inequalities and to improve prospects of employment, you have to deal with the energy crisis that makes it difficult to grow the economy. You have to create an environment that crowds in investments, so you have to break oligopolistic behaviors that make it difficult for new entrants in the economy to play their part. You have to create opportunities for small businesses to thrive, because after all, across the world, evidence suggests that small and medium enterprises are the greater employers than big corporates. All of those things, and we've tabled these proposals, and we've spoken to them in our conversation with both business and with both government and labor in various fora. We believe that the South African economy is capable of pushing back the crisis of unemployment, but we have to focus. We have to accept that this is not going to be a project-type approach that is characterized by dealing with a list of projects that emanate from a jobs summit or jobs conference or investment conference. It has to be systematic restructuring of the economy to deal with the fundamental deficiencies that make it difficult for this economy to grow to its full potential and create jobs and eliminate inequalities.
Right, transparency and disclosure, and how possibly stakeholder capitalism would provide us with a better way to organize the economy. Those are some of the questions we'll put to the President of Business Unity South Africa as we continue next. Let's get your views also tonight. Can business, big business, be viewed as a trustworthy and reliable partner beyond profiteering? In conversation with Business Unity South Africa President Sipho Pityane, talking stakeholder capitalism. Not only that, of course, we'll touch on the recovery. We'll also touch on what possibly business can do in assisting, particularly on the question of inequality. But what are your views tonight on Twitter at Newzroom 405, on WhatsApp 072-110-5584. Before the break, I mentioned the question of transparency and disclosure. The recent business scandals, even today, we are still carrying them in our headlines. Yet again, business seen to be playing a game with society, even under this new dawn where they continue to literally suck the state dry. I mean, how do you respond to that?
Well, certainly anybody who breaks the law, sucks the state dry illicitly and is involved in criminal activities has to face the full might of the law. We are on record as various business associations, after long protracted engagements, to take a very strong view on ethical conduct of businesses, and we have censured some of the members. You'll have seen that KPMG, McKinsey, even some of the state-owned entities that belong to some of our business organizations were either kicked out of those and were out in public in our condemnation of rogue behavior. I'm sure there can be a lot more that can be done by individual companies and all of that to deal with all of those things. The fact of the matter is that, like everywhere else in business, there would be bad apples, and we must deal with those, but we must set the tone that our expectation is that for business to be a worthy partner in any relationships in society, it has to be a partner that is honest, that is accountable, that is ethical in its conduct, and that it disavows corrupt conduct. But there are other issues, that I would like to speak to that relate to this. One of them is that the nature of the relationship between business and state-owned entities, for instance, is one of a supplier to most of those. And some of the proposals that Vulindlela is pursuing is forging partnership opportunities that would see business take risk with the state around some of the projects, so that business is not just a supplier, but also is capable of being vulnerable to being a loser on the other side of the table. So we've been encouraging that to say that this is what we've witnessed in businesses elsewhere in the world, that to the extent that business is not doesn't take risk, the state would be the only loser in a lot of what we've seen happening in the recent period.
Yeah. Talking of new approaches, there is, of course, now currently a cry and a deep need for anyone really who can, but also particularly with business, because they've got the capacity, and they have shown, particularly through this pandemic, that they've got the capacity to come up with amazing innovation and capacity to address the vaccine challenge. What can business do?
Well, at the beginning of the year, we had the meeting with the President, Minister of Finance, Minister of Health, and it was a very good meeting, and we were concerned that there possibly was a problem of funding of procurement of vaccines, and all of us were concerned that we should make sure that that doesn't happen. We were pleased to get assurance that government sees this as a priority, and if there's any shortage of funds with regard to this, it will redirect funds to make sure that we procure vaccines, and that for us was great reassurance. Secondly, we established a joint structure which has senior business leadership on our side, led by the CEO of BUSA, Kaskuvadia, with the Ministry of with government, which is led by the DG of Health and the representatives from the Ministry of Finance, to look at how we make sure that the rollout of that is effective. I have to tell you that the health sector is very keen to do this. That ramped up and provided infrastructure and facilities that are underutilized at this stage. And in fact, they have offered that they are prepared to do more than just seeing people by appointment, but also receive those that need to be vaccinated coming in without appointments, both from public and private sector, members of the private medical aid schemes and beyond. That clearly suggests a business that is prepared to lay out its infrastructure. It goes beyond the health sector, by the way. Other businesses have offered various facilities to ensure that we are part of the common response and assist the state wherever possible to be effective in its response to this.
Yeah. And why is society not feeling that? Is it because there's a pushback from government to allow business? I mean, even though, as you mentioned earlier on, at least in the last 2 weeks or so, the signals coming from the president are that they are now opened more to private sector participation. If you look at what they are saying at Eskom, if you look at what they are saying at South African Airways, if you look at what they are saying yesterday at the Transnet National Port Authority.
Well, I think that if we'll start with the COVID response, I would say that many people would know that there are suggestions galore. I mean, VW offered, built a health facility in Uitenhage. People in various communities would attest to a number of businesses that have rolled out infrastructure, and that has built a great deal of confidence in relationships with business. Could business do more? People would take a view that they probably should and can, and are engaged in various conversations around that. With regard to this vaccine rollout, we've urged government to please let us use our infrastructure and use excess capacity that is there to ensure that we fast track vaccination of our people, because that is the biggest intervention best intervention that we can make to reduce the number of deaths and indeed the spread of the virus. So we're committed to do whatever we can to make sure that we do this and work well with government. We have these regular meetings. We raise our concerns and we register those. And we are pleased that the government is taking this initiative to, at the same time as we are attending to the health challenges, to begin to drive the reform agenda of the economy, because we need to ensure that every opportunity is used for the economy to pick up. It has done very well since the beginning of the year. You can see that business confidence is up, consumer confidence is up, inflation is beginning to peak, to suggest that there's a great deal of activity. But of course, if you look at it sector by sector, where you are loading the mining industry, the tourism sector, we will say things are still very tough because COVID is still with us.
So many would say that again, where business is not mending the gap, for example, they'd say, why are you not raising concern? I'm talking Business Unity South Africa, for example, around the prioritization of one platform of vaccines over the other. There's a lot that is being said about who's profiting from this and so on and so forth. And why is Business Unity South Africa not raising concern about that?
We are satisfied that government is taking a science-based approach to vaccination and a science-based approach to the various interventions that have been taken in this regard, and we wouldn't want to pretend to be better informed than the scientists in regard to many of these, and we believe that that's the right approach. The choice of which vaccines are used must be based on that. It must be based on the efficacy, the extent to which it will be able to contend with the South African strain of the virus, and all of those things, all those considerations have to be taken into account. We are pleased that we were consulted in many of these engagements, and we believe that our responsibility is to work closely with government to raise our concerns and do more than that, prefer proposals of what can be done to solve things. We believe that we could do better with the rollout and procurement of these vaccines, but we're encouraged that government is working with us and using the capacity that we have made available. Of course, there's concern that we can't afford to have this capacity out there and it's underutilized, and therefore, if it's not used effectively, you would see a discouragement on the part of business. So I hope we don't get to that point. The sense I get from the discussions that are happening between business and government at the level of the bilaterals that I referred to earlier, is that there is a meeting of minds.
Yeah, there are these non-disclosures which have got many, for example, who are supposed to exercise oversight on the procurement of those vaccines, worried to say, for example, how much is being spent? What are the kind of deals and agreements that are going on? Now, you are someone, of course, who's raised your activism at some point in the country through Save South Africa, and these are some of the questions that you are raising about the previous administration. And the question is, why would you be quiet now?
Well, the procurement of vaccines is the responsibility of governments across the world. It's not a private sector issue. Government is out there public about how much vaccines have been procured from where and why, and those decisions are open to be debated and challenged. I've watched parliamentary debates around this. All of us are anxious that there should be speed, improved speed, and increased quantities of procurement of these vaccines. We've been open as business, and I have in particular been open about incidents of corruptions associated with the entirety of this pandemic. And we have to be vocal about that, all of us, because corruption steals from the poor. Corruption undermines and affects the poor and vulnerable the most. So we have to make sure that governance around these things is beyond reproach, and that it complies. And South Africans are watching this like hawks. You are, we are, Parliament is, the media is, all of us are looking at this very, very closely. The fact of the matter is that, yes, whilst we look at ensuring that there are no there's no corrupt conduct around this, and that there's as much transparency as is possible, we also must make sure that we put our shoulder to the wheel to ensure that these are procured and that these are distributed effectively.
Can South African business survive the third wave, but also his views and his thinking around the new approach and the new thinking that is prevalent, I suppose, throughout the globe? It was the theme at Davos in 2020. Stakeholder capitalism, and capitalism playing a much bigger role than just delivering or maximizing on shareholder value, but actually taking along societal needs and societal interest in ensuring that not only the business profits, but the whole economy wins. Sipho Pityana with us tonight. So we asked the question before the break, what your views are on this new approach, right? We hear one morning, we wake up that 51% of South African Airways is now in private hands. There are so many gaps in that story. For example, who were the participants? How much was this sold for? People are asking a whole lot of questions. How did they come to this consortium and these players who have been chosen? Is this the way or better way, shall I say, in organizing our economy?
Well, let me deal with that in two parts. The first part is the principle of public-private partnership and restructuring state-owned entities in this fashion is one that I support and is one that business supports. And what it does is that it acknowledges the role of the state in the economy, that in some instances the state will own entities and run them. In some instances, it will partner with the private sector in doing so for a whole range of reasons. The idea that the state should own all of its entities today is questionable from my perspective. There are a whole range of entities that the state owns that are no longer strategic. It doesn't make sense for the state to own those, and it pumps in lots of resources, and it's not running them appropriately. But there are others which the state should own and hold on to because they are strategic. I'll give you an example. A broadcaster, for instance, a public broadcaster, is a public utility. The state must own and fund it properly. I would argue that Denel is a strategic asset that must be in state hands, because it's more than just a commercial entity that's about selling arms. It is about our strategic defense as a nation. And you can go on and on and on like that. So we have to take a view that says, which ones of these should we be keeping? Which ones of these should be fully in state-owned hands, and which ones shouldn't be? One of the key and critical considerations in doing so, we must look at how this restructuring program enables improved access to capital, given the fact that the fiscus, the state, has limited funding capability to pump into these entities to enable them to be effective players in the economy. So to attract investment into those sectors, into those entities, public-private partnerships may be a way to go in some of the cases, and also attracting requisite skills, technologies, etc., etc. This is something that has been done in so many parts of the world successfully, with results that have shown growth of those entities, growth in employment in those, and enabling them to play meaningful roles in transforming those economies. There are examples where these opportunities have been used to, in fact, raid and undermine state assets as they are handed over to bodies. We've seen Russian oligarchs in the aftermath of communism taking over state-owned entities, and they were run by mafias. And we've seen this in other parts of the world where they have been restructured effectively. We must look at those case studies and draw from them. Now, in respect of this particular SAA example, by the way, I spoke to the Minister of Public Enterprises to understand what the transaction was all about and all of that. The principles of it make a great deal of sense, as I've indicated. In respect of the details around that, I think that it's right for South Africans to ask who these people are, how they came about to be identified, and all of this and all of that. He assures me that there are all the answers in respect of that. The deal is not unconditional, so the deal is not done yet, but they are a chosen consortium to take the conversation forward. They're doing their own due diligence. They'll be raising capital, and all the questions that are being asked about whether are they getting the money from, are they getting it from the PIC, and there's a lot of speculation with regard to all of that, will be answered at that point. That's the feedback that we've received. There's a requirement in any event for all these things to be done transparently. Constitutionally, you can't dispose of state assets in a quiet, secret way. It has to be done transparently and openly. That's a requirement by law.
Now, there is, of course, the conversation that you're raising and we are having tonight of a new path that should be molded by business, a path that delivers on growth and development, but one that addresses societal problems of inequality and inefficiencies. The Auditor General says yesterday in Parliament, 5.5 billion rands at municipalities goes missing, and nobody knows at this particular point how that money has gone missing. Speaks of inefficiencies at local government level. We know with the story of Clover, for example, that those inefficiencies, in turn, they end up affecting business. Now, instead of business saying, well, we'll pack our bags and we'll go, what role can they play in closing that gap?
Well, we've been raising this. I mean, the Auditor General's litany of reports before has indicated that something that suggests that some of this is orchestrated, because if you employ people without requisite competencies to run your finances, of course, that's the result that you'll get. You'll get irregular expenditure, siphoning off of resources because the system has been disabled. So one of the first things that has to be done is that appropriately qualified people must be appointed in those structures who are able to manage the finances of the state properly. There is ample number of South Africans who are qualified to play those roles. They are overlooked, and people that don't have the requisite qualifications are appointed, and as a consequence, that's the problem that we have. So it's a its own goal, if you like, as far as we're concerned. We have made several offers that we are concerned as business about the growing dysfunctionality of local government. Remember that there is nobody who lives at a place called national or provincial. We all live in localities. The rubber hits the road with whether the local government works or doesn't work, because you could be running a factory and have no water, or running a factory or have no electricity, or one or other of the things, or road infrastructure is badly affected, undermines your ability to do your work, or your levies and rates and taxes are overcharged by virtue of maladministration there, and it causes huge inconvenience that costs jobs and opportunities. So the proper functioning of municipalities is something that affects business on a daily basis. I can give you a litany of examples of how much business is frustrated by dysfunctionalities that are happening at municipalities, and it's causing huge problems for the economy and for the country as a whole.
Going forward, business would need to strike balance and compromise if we are talking stakeholder capitalism. But many have put this question to you, for example, in the various hats that you have worn in business, to say, what have you done particularly for black executives, right? There's a call to say there needs to be a change in remuneration of black executives when you look at the work that they do compared to their white counterparts. But also, there needs to be a change in remuneration when we're talking about black women executive in particular.
Well, I have to say that the principle of equal pay for equal work is one that we must ensure that is lived up to. There should be no place where black executives who do work of equal value to their white counterparts are paid less. There's no reason why that should happen. And to the extent that it does, it's in fact outside of the law, and it's capable of being challenged. So it's not about anybody doing anyone a favor. It is just proscribed in terms of the law that anybody should be paying black executives less than their white counterparts, to the extent that that's an issue. So my understanding, the issues really are more than just about compensation of black executives. The issues are about whether the culture of corporate South Africa is permissive of black professionals at whatever level in the system being able to build a career sustainably and go up the ranks in corporate South Africa. That's a debate that we must have, and it's not just peculiar to various institutions, it's across the board. The sense of alienation among black executives, if you talk to individual black managers in different sectors of this economy, there is any number of anecdotes that speak to alienation, marginalization, underappreciation, lack of recognition of their skills and competencies, etc., etc., etc. That suggests that continued pervasive racial practices, despite the fact that our laws don't allow it. So we need to talk about how we deal with that. What you find in employment equity reports of how many blacks and how many whites, how many women have been promoted or in senior positions is a quantitative analysis of what progress we're making or not. What it doesn't expose sufficiently is the struggle, the daily struggles that that blacks and women have to contend with in our environments.
Finally, will South Africa survive, particularly business, another lockdown? I tell you what, the leader of the opposition saying it seems the only tool that government is able to wield is this blunt instrument of blanket restrictions. Firstly, do you agree with that sentiment? And what do you make of the possibility of another lockdown, maybe not 5, but at least tighter restrictions?
Well, I've been in discussions with government on a range of things, and I don't think that there's a blunt instrument approach of anything. Certainly, with regards to this COVID-19, in the first instance, the President made this point when the first lockdown was introduced. In fact, some of us in business were urging him to take drastic measures to ensure that we help society adjust to this pandemic and make sure that we are able to cope with it. And part of the first announcement of restrictions that we introduced, you would have seen we were out there and supportive, and we knew that that was going to have put business in very difficult situations. And we've been trying in the recent period to encourage everyone to go back to non-pharmaceutical interventions. In other words, behavioral aspects of this, social distancing, wearing masks, staying at home, avoiding crowded spaces in order to reduce the spread. Anybody who's looking at the numbers today would certainly be concerned that government might look at this and say, we are not getting the sort of behavior that we have we expected in Gauteng alone, which is the epicenter of the pandemic, and of course is the heartbeat of our economy. The numbers are quite scary, much higher than anything we've seen in the first and second waves. So it's quite clear that this there might be debates in government today that more drastic measures should be taken. But our sense is that government has taken a balanced view consistently of saving lives and saving livelihoods. It's keeping an eye on the economy and all of that. As business, we don't have a sense that there's a blunt instrument that is doesn't take these considerations into account.
Sibophi, we appreciate your time and thank you very much for joining us tonight here on In Focus.